Mm. Trying to decide or trying to like weigh out everything or
No, just I think like it's like back to like doing, maybe this is the theme, I don't know, for today or whatever. Like what is too much?
uh,
No, yeah, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this, and you're just like you're so stretched thinly that you know that you get overwhelmed. And I think I was feeling a little bit of that last night and through my sleep was like, and over, like, man, there's a lot going on.
yeah.
And as a general rule, I perform when there's pressure on and deadlines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I was aware of it. I was
Yeah.
aware of it all throughout the night. Ahí estoy.
Either
You know,
go
yeah,
ahead,
no, no,
Jose.
no. I mean, so as you guys were talking, I'm thinking like these conversations are few and far between in our lives where we're able to sort of overlap so many different sort of interests, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as not as people who are ambitious in many ways, you know, not just in education, but you all are starting a business and are trying to sort of think of how to not just be a leader, but how to make leaders, right?
Yeah.
It's a very sort of niche conversation, you know. It's a very niche conversation. You kind of want to be surrounded by people that are not just like part of the conversation, but have like that stake in it, you know? And I think to some extent, these conversations are few and far between in our lives, but it's what we live for, you know, it's what we want. Not just because it helps us in our own process, but it's something we need, you know, to continue to sort of work through our ambitious goals, through our sort of limitations, through our whatever it might be, you know. Um, and there's a lot of overlap with a lot of friends, but you know, when you're able to find that sort of like that sort of spot where you're sort of combine your passion with your personal you know, just existence as
Mm-hmm.
Chicanos, as men, as you know, people you know, in the community, work in the community, you know, that the conversation becomes very natural and free flowing, that it can sort of go from, you know, like our other conversation, it can go on a variety of different levels, professional, personal, cultural, political, on so many different levels,
Mm-hmm.
and still have that sort of strand within that, because you know, as people who work in the community, it's all interconnected, or at least we
Yeah.
try to be all interconnected in that way, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think this is like the when people say I want to be a fly on the wall in certain things, I think this is the fly on the wall, right? Like this is where we're workshopping or troubleshooting some of our, at least for me, some of the stuff that I'm trying to figure out, or some of the stuff that I'm being impacted by, personal work, entrepreneurship, whatever, right? So this is as fly in the wall as you could get, I think.
And even the question
Besides
of how
having
much,
the
go
camera,
ahead,
right?
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, Jose.
And even the question of how much is too much, or what, like, are these conversations, you know, because like we have
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities, and Miguel is gonna, you know, go full into his profession, or you know, full into the job, and like how much is too much, but how where do we sort of place the things that nurture us, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
not just professionally, but like this space, like or even going to the gym or doing physical activities, right? Like that's a certain way of, like, for me that would be a priority. How do I sort of balance my life professionally as we continue to sort of work on our professional goals,
Yeah.
where we can sort of continue to sort of like balance these things out, and that's the question. Like everybody has a different bandwidth, you know. I know that I can't be doing it with the type of sleep that Miguel gets, and quite frankly I'm not sure if that amount of sort of like level of stress is something that I look forward to.
Uh-huh.
But you know, obviously the more pressure we have, and I know when I worked in my doctor program and in full-time work, uh, I was super productive, you know, super
Yeah.
productive. There's nothing like having those deadlines to sort of get to the
Yeah.
point you want to get to the fastest way possible, you know?
Yeah. And like no quedaba de otra, right? Like you had to do it, right?
Oh,
Or that
you
or
know, to some extent, it was like a toxic relationship. It wasn't
mm-hmm.
even what I needed. It was like, what do you have for me now? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I have
Yeah.
everything you need. But like on this side, you know, I'm like, you know, put it, you know, barely holding it together kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. And I'll say I've been straddling sort of the full-time work, the teaching, and then some sort of consultancy for many years, right? Like that triad.
Mm.
And I've definitely gotten feedback, right? Hey, dad, you're not available, or hey, hubby, like I've gotten those feedback. So I step off the gas on one, or and then a couple years ago when I was kind of like forcefully let go of the big one and then have to focus on the entrepreneurship and teaching, right? I had to like put myself into positions where I could still make it work. And again, the pandemic and being available and having stuff behind your head. And, so it's sometimes it's a busy activity thing, but then sometimes like in your head busy, right? Or like in your head trying to like structure and figure stuff out. Because when it's time to do it, like there's no like processing time. It's just like vamos, like you gotta put pieces together, you gotta talk to people, and there's no like moment to process the time. So there's just a lot of like head fogginess that I find myself sometimes. But physically, I'm not as busy, but in my heads or in like my little structure things or my productivity things, it's packed, right? Or the agenda's packed with things, or the calendar, right? Um, yeah, you saw this commercial. I don't know if it was a commercial. Where the hell did I see it? But it was I'm not gonna talk to you unless I'm getting three things. And it was like, am I getting money out of this conversation? Am I getting some love out of this conversation? Or there was like a third thing, but I cracked up because can you imagine if we went around with everything saying like, if this conversation is not gonna give me more money, more love, or there was a third one, man, like we
Fulfillment? I don't
yeah,
know.
no, it was something.
Third one.
It's like a funny one, but like not everything could be transactional like that, and not everything's kind of be like, doing solo. So I think the spending time in my head to trying to figure stuff out is needed, but I could see how it could like bog me down. And I think that's when for me it gets too much, when I'm like in my head too much and I'm not physically or actively producing something.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Argenis, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were like working, you had a full-time
Yeah.
job, or
See,
you had a full-time position,
see.
and you had your business on the side. How did you? Because at that point, like you have to be very selective about what you bring in, or very selective about how you sort of like put out your name out there, even within the position that you have. How
See.
did you sort of like balance that out? You know what I'm saying? Because
So
you're
I'll even throw in a bigger wrench is that for the first year or two, I was still finishing my doctorate. So I had like
yeah.
four things, ¿verdad?
Yeah.
And here's what I know physically declined is I got really overweight big time, right? Like
Yeah.
I got really like my weight went off the scale literally. I was eating lo que podía and then just on the road and this and that. And then I was starting off the sort of consultant stuff. So I was really being guided by somebody who like has been in the field before and was just kind of piecemealing me like activities and things for me to do. So that was enough for me. Like if I go run a group or if I go do an assessment or something, it was like task oriented. And then when he and I started like troubleshooting, I'm like, well, what else can we do together, right? I started thinking like, oh shoot, I do have like a sales pitch version of how this could happen. So I think I started scaling a little bit of what else I could do, and it interests me. Um, secondary data analysis, these type of things I can do, but it's not something I jump out of bed and go do, right? Like man, spreadsheets y todo eso, like I could do it. That's not a problem. That's not my preference. My preference is to go out there, talk to people, get some sort of qualitative, like that's what I'm interested in. So if I could put myself in that position, that's what I was aiming to do more. But just like everything, like as my doctorate started wrapping up, I also started teaching, right? So it was always like something over the next thing, and it started overlapping where like if I was studying from 8 to 12, 8 to 1, 8 to 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., that replaced like when I was doing my consultant stuff, or that replaced when I was doing my prep work for teaching or something. So the time was like kind of flopped into the spaces I already had because there was no more hours of the day. Like I was already getting 5-6 hours of sleep like that. That's doable. And then when I'm at work, I'm pretty at work, right? Like there's no like teaching in between or something, but it's kind of, how do you say, it's compartmentalized where like I'm doing this, yes, doable, and then I'm doing that and I switch over. It rarely do those kind of worlds collide. time wise at least.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. But the
Yeah.
so and then I'm also strategic. So if I'm teaching a class on, let's say, leadership or organizing or something, and I see some outstanding students, right? Like, oh, this person or he or she or whoever, then I put a pin on that, like, hey, and I always tell the students, like, hey, how can we work together down the road, right? Like, obviously, it's conflict of interest right now, but like down the road when you graduate, how can we figure this out? And it has been when either they were my intern or my student or something. And then down the road, 2-3 years pass and they graduate, and they hit me up or I hit them up and say, hey, this is what I got going on. How can you help out? So my train of thought there is like building my little Avengers team, because that way I know what their strengths are, they know what my strengths are. Yes, Stubo. Like that's why I think I'm able to manage stuff, because I lean on what I'm good at and try not to spend time what drives me crazy or what somebody else is better at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, it was. I wanted to say like it was re-triggering, but that's an exaggeration. But thinking through that, it was like the director of leadership development for the small org. That was launching, and then there was like school leadership, and to your point, the doctorate had just wrapped up. So I remember like chale. So I went. So this is where for me, I mean, I went from a principalship
Mhm.
to an assistant principalship. And so some were like, hey, careful with your resume, yada, yada, yada. And then I was like, but I'm going into something new that I haven't learned before, which is elementary school. And as a
Yeah.
father of two little girls, then that was new enough for me to kind of learn. And so like Jose, like for me, I took like it took a back. There's a strategic, hey, I got to get this done. For 1 year, I didn't do a lot of work because it was like the priority was the eight. Well, I was going to say the 8 to 5, but really, like the 8 to all hours and getting done as I was at a school that we're finishing up a $23+ million construction project and redesigning what the school was, a capital project. We redesigned what the school was, creating pathways, new buildings, focus groups, etc. And it just took that those things needed to get done. What I will say is that, there's interesting that like, how do you make that happen? In hindsight, I told my superintendent, like I thought he was going to be excited. And so the superintendent had his doctorate. And I put it out to the cabinet. I'm like, hey, y'all, I'm going into year 2. I got into a doctoral program. Just want to share the exciting news. I'm the first in my family to even engage or attempt this, to think of this first ever, right? And then there was crickets. Nobody responded. And then when I sat down with my one-on-one with the superintendent said like, well, I did it, and I guess you can too. Just make sure whatever time is required, it comes out of your personal life.
Yikes.
Boom.
Wow.
Never brought it up with him again. The assistant soup was just a little bit older than I was. I'm like, hey, did you read? Oh, yeah, I got it. Hey, well, there's a reason I'm not in a doctoral program. It's because, and then I just was like, huh? It's because I realized I have a full-time job. That's why I'm not in a doctoral program. Done. Never brought it up to him again.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was one Chicano, Latino, Mexican American cabinet member, and he was like, hey, felicidades, échale ganas. And then he would, from time to time, every few months or whatever, we would schedule a little one-on-one to just check in, but nothing like hands-on. And so it was really surprising to me. It was a cold bath. Because as an educator, you would think we're aiming to be lifelong learners, quote unquote. You're always learning, you're always getting better. There's always new stuff, right? We're always developing. And that was not my experience